Using free cash is not dangerous. Using free cash is a bridge to, hopefully, to your point a moment ago, to getting the 16 elected officials and other stakeholders and boards in the same room to come up with a sustainable, cogent, solvent financial strategy for the future.
Correct. Steve Sherlock here for Franklin Matters. Franklin Public Radio, available anywhere, anytime, in your browser. Yeah, on the internet, in your browser, WFPR.FM. And in the local Franklin, Mass. FM radio dial. Yeah, the dial or the push buttons, the knobs. 102.9 is the number. Just preset it. It's always there ready for you. Here in our glorious studio today with Town Administrator Jamie Hellen. Jamie, welcome. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. It's spring. And it's great to be in the studio again, and the sound in here is excellent, and the air conditioning is fantastic.
You know,
nice and muggy
that's
outside,
why I called it
so
glorious, because it's got all those factors
nice
built
and
into
cool.
it.
It's it's great, and we're getting closer to the summer, and looking forward to hopefully a little bit of a breather after the budget stuff is done. And
yeah,
so
because
that's
we're
what
still
here to
on
talk
that.
about.
Well, I mean, you generally talk about budget in three types across the year. The prior year, the current, and the future. We're about to get off the slide for the future one fairly soon.
I said
I hope.
I said it at the budget hearings a couple weeks ago. The horses are now in the gate for FY27.
Right.
You work all previous 8 or 9 months to lead up to this moment, and you feel like it's the end. Mm-hmm. But it's actually really just the beginning of FY27, right? Of fiscal year 27 for the listeners, starting on July 1st. You go through all these meetings and conversations and updates, and you're looking at all the changes and trends, and you feel like that's your regular season, and that this is now your Super Bowl. But it's actually the inverse.
Right.
It's actually this is preseason, and now we're officially kicking off the season with the budget hearings from FinCom and the Council.
Yep.
And as you'll see in my revised budget notes this coming week, the numbers are going to change, a fair amount again.
You said because there were some things out there like healthcare, et cetera.
Well, also healthcare, but also I think for new people that are involved in the budget, it's a 24/7, 365 exercise. Mm-hmm. And for people out there that have this expectation that they can tune in for an hour on one chosen night and figure it all out, they're not doing themselves justice to learn the budget process. So, there's a lot of assessments. We're part of regional districts. Mm-hmm. We have preliminary numbers when we start this, but we get actual assessments on our pension assessment, the Tri-County assessment, the MEC Regional Dispatch Center, animal control, a whole variety of accounts.
Never mind the state level between the governor budget, the House budget, the Senate budget.
Excellent
And then
point.
they still have to reconcile it.
And they still have to reconcile it. And exactly, a great point, right? So all these things evolve throughout the winter and spring. And then we're able to put together a blueprint. And as I reminded everybody a couple weeks ago, we haven't collected any money yet for next year.
Not yet.
So all of these numbers are just based off, actuals, assumptions. Some of them are obviously legal documents, like the pension assessment is a state law, and we've got to pay it, and the number's the number, right? There's a pension board that votes on that stuff each year. Same thing with enrollment for Tri-County or the Norfolk Aggie, or what the per pupil cost is going to be. Those things generally, like you're saying, vet themselves out through the budget. But then there's the state aid issues, where the House does their budget in April, the Senate just did their budget last month, and we think we've got it, but it's not done yet.
Nope.
They'll go to conference committee. We'll have a budget done this summer. And given the issues in D.C., maybe that goes a little later than usual. I don't know.
And then depending upon what the governor does, she may up or down it depending.
She may make vetoes, and then they have to go back and override vetoes.
Right.
And I want the listener to know that we empathize with you as you listen to this and feel like, why can't government just make it a one-page, easy fact sheet for us to all digest once in the year? And, unfortunately, that's just not possible. It's one of those things where state revenues change, policies at the federal level change the state revenues. We'll talk about that a little bit with healthcare. And that's why we have a professional staff. That's why the schools have a school business administrator. That's why we have a finance team. We track this stuff all the time, every day. I have weekly finance meetings with my team, with HR and finance. I'm sure Lucas has his, weekly or biweekly meetings with his finance staff.
Sure.
The superintendent and I meet every 2 weeks on Tuesdays at 10:30. We're all in regular communication, and we all try to give the most updates we can to the finance committee. And through the year, as I outlined in my documents coming up this week, I also remind people, every quarter we do a quarterly revenue report with the finance committee. We do quarterly year-to-dates. So this October, we'll do, Q1 for revenues and year-to-date expenditures. We show them trends. We highlight if there are problems. And this is all cyclically built into state law.
Correct.
So if people are frustrated with this, again, we really do empathize, because I know time is very tight for most families and most residents, and it's very, very hard and complicated. But that's why the residents out there elect the people they elect, and that's why you have the staff that we have.
Right.
We've got this.
Yep.
And so if anybody out there ever has any more questions, we have a full website on franklinma.gov, town budget. And as you know, Steve, one of the things I am proud about since I've been here in Franklin, and I think you will agree, the transparency and the amount of information that is available on our budget archive now goes back about 10 years.
Right.
We have all the budgets going back to 16. We have all our capital budgets, our audits, our bond ratings.
Right.
I mean, at some point, there's only so much we can put out.
Right.
But I think if people are really interested in some of these things, they can just cruise around, and we try to make it as easy for people to think of as possible. But we are a $150, $60, $70 million enterprise. So think of us like a corporation, and there's a lot of dynamics affiliated with that.
Providing service to us as residents of 35,000 plus or minus.
And
365 days,
Yep.
24/7, police, fire, water, sewer, you name it.
It's all there.
It's all there.
It's all there. And if you get overwhelmed, just call us up on the phone. Just shoot a text, send an email.
Two quick things. One, technically, the budget year from your business cycle actually finally ends in November, December, when you vote to set the tax rate.
Correct.
Finally putting the pin on.
Yep.
And
Correct.
then that obviously creates some agita amongst those who don't fully understand that the first two tax bills are estimates and then the last two are actuals. But you've already got a process, and there's things in the work to redevise or redesign that format. So it makes it more understandable in terms of these are the changes and that's why.
Correct.
But then the second point is that's why we do these conversations.
That's right.
Because instead of spending 17 hours on the FinCom or however many other hours on the budget hearings, in 30, 40 minutes, you get the gist of it here.
Try to boil it down. And the process is all laid out in state law, as you said. And, we try to make sure we educate people on that as best we can, including the elected officials. And, we try to spend a half hour here, trying to go through this here. And this is one medium. We certainly encourage people to look at the deep dive on the Town Hall, Franklin TV Town Hall YouTube page of looking at those meetings. But obviously 17, 18 hours of FinCom deliberation might get boring for people. But also there's a lot of concern in the community around the budget, right? And certainly the two failed overrides. There's been a lot of misleading narratives in the community. There's been a lot of theories that aren't facts. It's been hard to try to put some of those genies back in a bottle. And we also just try to provide it to people in as many formats as possible, right? So if you want to watch the meetings on YouTube, there they are on your time. We have the Talk Franklin episodes here. We have everything laid out in documents. In fact, this year I did something a little new. Speaking to that, we're releasing two different budgets, same numbers. One is going to be a clean copy with just the numbers of each budget. And then there's another version I've printed out in landscape format where I'm editorializing small notes right next to the numbers. So for example, new growth we're going to assume is a little higher. Okay. And in the notes I said increased new growth by the assessor, admin, salary, and benefits costs. So basically you're paying for yourself. So people know there's a correlation there. They can see here with local aid we've injected in the Senate numbers, right?
Okay.
So those adjustments. So we're putting notes columns And I'm just making sure it's very clear in the notes that if you just want to know what changed from February, you can just look at those 30 notes or so.
So you don't have to spend the prior 3 or 4 months to understand. You just look at the one doc and say, oh, this is where the changes are.
You don't have to compare and contrast and do your own math either. We've got increase, decrease numbers. So we're giving 2 budgets out, one that's clean and one that has notes. So here's another format we're trying to do to get out there to people that if you only have a little bit of time, you can look at these and hopefully gain a broader understanding of what has changed since February.
Correct.
And I think that even this year, I've given the schools a lot of credit and the staff. I mean, we released a budget this year months earlier than we normally do. So we've given the community even more time to deliberate, talk, understand, think, read, comment than we ever have before. I think I released it around February vacation this year, which is a month and a half earlier than we ever have before. And for people, we were talking offline about institutional knowledge. For the folks that are listening to this who didn't live in Franklin in 2014, 15, 18, whatever, this is an immaculate amount. More formats, more diversity of formats, more availability, more data, more history. People may feel overwhelmed with it, but 15 years ago, none of this existed for the community. The council never got any kind of detail to this level. And so it's something that people should be proud of, even if it feels like as that same decade is turned on, every family and individual has far less time than we did 10 years ago. Right?
Which is where, because of what I'm doing, augmenting what you're doing, right? Trying to have the consolidated approach to do, whether it's a quarterbacking session, chalkboard chat session, Talk Franklin to condense, right? My record is out there. There's thousands of podcast episodes.
We now know thousands.
We know now, 1,700 as of we speak. 300 approximately a year. And to that accessibility, the other key point will be kind of the joint budget sessions. There was the 6, video, audio, and then I produced a transcript. So that accessibility was out there. And my archives go back to 2007. So if people can't find it on the town page, and respectively, you had at least 3 system upgrades during those times, you can reach out to me and I can go dig in my archives and I'll probably pull up the answer.
That's right.
So,
I mean, it's all out there. One place a lot of this is not is Facebook commentary areas. And I think this is one thing that, as we have an audience on this podcast who's listening to this, it's not that everything is incorrect on Facebook, and it's not that opinions aren't valuable, but that's not usually the source of the material that people need to fully understand the budget. Your archive is a place to go. Our town archive is a place to go. And to channel my inner Jeff Nutting, even the old-fashioned way of just picking up the phone and calling somebody, stopping in the office, shooting a quick email. Our staff are very responsive. The school staff are responsive. So just to give everybody a quick update, in February I released the budget. I was very clear that healthcare was going to be the biggest factor in this year's budget for many reasons, which we'll get into in a minute. That'll be a majority of probably today's discussion. But as I said a moment ago, numbers evolve throughout the process, and we just try to check in. But I was very clear that we wouldn't probably have a final vote until June because of healthcare. And the good news is, as we sit here today, we're going to have a finance committee meeting. When this is released, you can look at June 3rd on Wednesday, June 3rd at 6 o'clock. Finance committee is going to look through all of the final revised documents on the operating budget, healthcare, remaining free cash, also the Community Preservation Act, as well as a myriad of other legal obligations they have over the town clerk's salary, revolving funds, a whole myriad of things.
There's a bunch of procedural things that need to be set up for, like each of the revolving funds, the enterprise funds need to be set up again each year.
Exactly. So that the water, sewer, trash, and stormwater. So now, if you really haven't been paying attention to any of the budget for the past several months, and you're really into it, and hopefully you are because you're listening to this, now is really the time to really get engaged for the last few weeks
between
before
June 3rd, June
school is out.
10th, maybe some cleanup on the 17th meeting, but
Correct.
June is when it's happening.
So as of this podcast, you can consider June 3rd, June 10th, and June 17th, FinCom and Town Council meetings are going to wrap up, this kind of getting out of the start gate on FY27. And then we've got to let some time pass, right?
Correct.
Just to let the fiscal year start and revenues to come in. And so really, there's two categories of issues to break down the budget that I like to give everybody a heads up on. One is healthcare, and we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to do that second. But first are really just an update of basic accounts. So one thing we've done is increase new growth estimates a little bit because we hope that there'll be an administrative assistant in the assessor's office, which will free up virtually another full-time appraiser to go out in the streets and capture new growth.
Right.
And that will only be for about 3/4 of a year. But as we get into the system, we hope that will be a return on investment that will be far more than just paying for itself in the future. So we're going to tick that up just a little bit to cover the costs. A couple of other things, state aid. I want to give the town council a lot of credit. I think they deserve it. I also think the Mass Municipal Association deserves a lot of credit. Rep Roy and Senator Roush, we all wrote letters this year. The entire town council wrote a letter to them with their budget priorities. And the good news is, as of now, we're looking at about $638,000 in additional state aid. Now, some of that is Chapter 70. Some of that is increased money that goes into those accounts that help mitigate the impacts to Chapter 70 for Franklin, charter school reimbursement, et cetera. But also the Senate dove in heavily on increasing unrestricted general government aid by about 4%. So for Franklin, that was a substantial amount of revenue.
Sure.
And I think this is one of those stories that I'll pause for a minute. One, we hadn't had many previous boards write letters like this. So to have all 9 counselors write a letter to our delegation.
And school committee, I believe.
And the school committee did too. You're correct.
Right.
Is huge. So, they should be commended for stepping up. They didn't ask for a lot of earmarks this year. They didn't ask for other appropriations. The schools did, and good for them for getting earmarks. But our priority was local aid. And also, for those that aren't familiar with the Mass Municipal Association work, I am not sitting here, in case any MMA people hear this podcast, taking single-handed credit for it. But while I was vice president and president and the new administration there of the new executive director, we went out consciously and strategically to try to show that UGA, unrestricted general government aid, it's literally as it speaks. You just plug budget gaps with it. Unrestricted general government aid, UGA, had flatlined over a decade. Well, the Senate put $53 million into that account for the formula statewide. So that bumped our number up a couple hundred more thousand. So that's all really good news. So we plugged in the state aid numbers. There were a few areas. I also made the decision to, because the new positions we were proposing, that restoring the deputy town administrator, the student resource officers, there was no way we were going to hire them on July 1st, right?
No.
So
practicality, you got to post, get some resumes,
we got job descriptions,
interviews, and all that kind of stuff.
So we took a cut to that and made them effective October 4th. So that effectively saved about $150,000 from what the original model was, just by being realistic and saying, okay, we're going to get these positions filled, hopefully by the fall. And then, unfortunately, some of the assessments went up. The MEC Regional Dispatch Center went up a little bit by about $70,000. The Animal Control went up $20,000 or so. And Tri-County went up a lot. Tri-County went up almost $340,000. So that was a big number that is increased on our budget. Now, we had an estimate in January, because that's what you get as a preliminary. And here's why people need to walk through and understand the budget process. As those go through, they then get an actual head count, and they get a per pupil cost. So the per pupil cost for Tri-County went up $1,202 per student, which is a lot. And they also added 6 students. Now, for people like you, Steve, that have been paying attention to the budgets for a long time, they know next year they could be down 7 students. And so next
had a
year,
range year to year.
You have a range, but the point is these numbers are always going to ebb and flow a little
Correct.
bit. And there's not much we can do about them.
No.
We just have to look at the real numbers. So it went up 341,000, which is a lot. The good news is, overall, is a lot of that kind of equalized each other out.
Yeah. Kind of
offsets a little bit. It's not exact, but
the one other piece on Tri-Counter briefly, with their new school when it opens, there may in fact be another few students that go there,
Correct.
rightly because they want to take an advantage of that in the new school, and that's what that's for.
But that point you're making, if the listeners hear that, it also, you're correct. We could have right now they're anticipating 186 students. When the school opens in a couple of years, it could be 191 or 192.
Right.
So it is something and it's an expensive education, a valuable one that provides kids with great skills for return on investment in the economy, and we probably need more seats there.
Right.
But it's something that people should be conscientious about. By the way, that increase has nothing to do with the debt exclusion on the building costs. So that's
totally separate.
On the positive side, really, what I just spoke of there is a majority of the changes that people will see outside of benefits. So fairly limited, not overly too much. There was a little tweak up in election costs. There's a few other small reductions in areas where we had vacant positions, and now that we filled it, there's a little bit less money that we needed because the actual were different. So what we try to do is, when there are vacant positions, now we update the personnel sheets and we put in the actual salaries, right?
Correct.
So we modernize all of this through usually Memorial Day. This year, as you know, the second point I added from earlier is really about benefits in healthcare.
Right.
And this is where everybody's going to see a lot of change. There's definitely going to be some positive bullet points out of this, and there's going to be some nervousness out of this. So quickly, I do want to make sure it's important, and I did say it at the budget hearings, and I'll say it again. My revised budget will also honor all of the changes that the Finance Committee recommended. And I feel like that's very important. They spent 18 hours debating the budget.
17 plus at least.
17 and a half, 17, 18 hours. But who was counting by the but
we were losing count. We were falling asleep.
I loved it. I also do this for a living, and I could do this stuff for 24 hours a day. I thought it was awesome. And
as a reporter, I found it rather insightful to see so many good questions, so many good conversations.
Now, you and I both know that previous finance committees have always looked under the hood.
They have.
Some members have tried to take apart the engine and get into it. But even having 5 out of 9 new members in the last year shows, again, another new group of people, of a new set of eyes in town looking under the hood. And I thought it was really awesome, the process that Ryan Lavorgna designed. I can see why he's very successful in what he does for a living.
In terms of his sorting through the priorities on the last night, I had not seen that in all my years of reporting. I've seen it in business. I have not seen it in government.
Correct.
And that was perfect.
And he was very disciplined in it. He did a great job holding the members within the lines there and bounds. And it was a truly consensus-driven recommendation. And I feel that they spent so much time and so much hard work, and they designed such a process that to not honor that, I don't think is fair, and I don't think it's right as me as the TA who does support the Finance Committee. Some people want to get rid of the Finance Committee. Some people don't think it's useful. I also think Finance Committee members have saw themselves sometimes as a rubber stamp, which is not true, but they feel like sometimes their voice hasn't always been honored, and I respect that. And I want to honor their voice. They didn't make a tremendous amount of changes, but they did do about a dozen and a half accounts. So their net savings out of their recommendation was about $196,000 off the budget. And they did trim OPEB. They did add some stuff too, by the way.
Right.
So we did trim OPEB down in the benefits budget $150,000. The pension assessment was reduced to $158,000 because there's a prepay option on July 1st, which we'll do. Workers' comp, because of some large claims coming off, as well as our good performance, kudos to our employees, is reduced to $152,000. Unemployment went down a little bit because we're not talking about layoffs or redistricting or any of that stuff, so we're trying to trim those numbers. So when you get into that, you start looking at the numbers and you say, well, those are all really good trends, right?
Right.
And those are all part of the 9-10 budget. Now, in terms of health insurance for town and school...
And before you get there, the
sure.
one other point on FinCom, they made or found minor tweaks.
They did.
The other way to phrase it is they validated your budget. And this is not just 9 people off the street. These are CFOs, CIOs, COOs,
successful people.
These are people who manage budgets in the real world, asked questions, and validated your budget.
They did. I appreciate that. They did. I mean, a majority of it.
A majority.
Including the new
tweaks,
position, including the restored
tweaks.
positions, right? They also there was a lot of positive comments, which I've said too, to the school district for, getting their number down. And I think they made a strategic point. Chair Griffith and Vice Chair Callahan he was chair and vice chair, and even Ruth Ann and Dave McNeil and people that have been around for a few years. I think they felt some of the commentary from the public about some of their previous decisions when they weren't on those boards. Mm-hmm. And, they trimmed the school budget a hair, but it was really a compromise number among a series of questions from the committee, and it was not a huge number. It was only $60,000. Right. But ultimately, they validated the school committee's strategy, too.
Absolutely.
And so I think you're right. I think they validated the level of service. Mm-hmm. They validated the services. They validated my budget proposal in February.
Right.
As sometimes I can't make this stuff up, but we had budgeted $15.5 million for healthcare in February, and the budget for healthcare came in at $15.5 million.
Bingo!
Now
play that number.
Now, there was an increase of about $20,000, which is literally the value. That is less than the cost of one person's healthcare account for the town.
Right.
So,
in another terminology, that's a de minimis number.
That's a de minimis number out of how many eligible subscribers and how many people subscribe. But once you get into those numbers is where I think the public is going to look hard at a lot of it, and there's going to be hopefully some good discussion and analysis. On the positive side, the move to the GIC is a strategic win for a lot of reasons.
Right.
We've articulated them in the past, but we did notice that the number did come down quite a bit structurally from the plans that people chose. We did save well over $750,000. Right.
So let's dwell on that particular point for people to make sure that they understand. And by way of disclosure as well, because my wife's a retiree and I'm part of that as a spouse, I'm benefiting under or a part of the GIC process, which clearly having reported on a number of things, you've always looked at GIC in prior years. Maybe not every single year, but you've looked at it frequently. In the pool of benefits that you were looking for, you were able to, because of the performance of kind of the return and claims, et cetera, you were generally able to get better premiums on your own.
That's correct.
But in the last couple of years, things have changed with that, and the risk pool is now higher, so that we're costing the premiums. Yep. We're not helping the company save the premiums. So shifting the pool from an individual provider to the GIC expands that pool, and thereby, theoretically, yes, it was going to come down. The question is how much.
Yep.
But it came down. That's the key piece.
And we're able to structurally spread our risk out, right? So what Steve is talking about are called loss runs, and those of you may know what they are. It's very easy to explain. For every dollar in premium the town and employees pay to Harvard Pilgrim, if you have a loss run of 105, Harvard Pilgrim loses money on you. Mm-hmm. So it's a business.
Right.
Anybody who thinks that they're there for civic responsibility is crazy. It's a business. Mm-hmm. And if we don't want them to go bankrupt either, because if they go bankrupt, then we don't have care, right? So ultimately, since the pandemic, our loss runs have gotten really poor. Mm-hmm. And we triage things. We used to call it bend the trend, which is what you were just describing.
Sure.
we won't go into a whole deep dive on the Insurance Advisory Committee and mass statutes, but ultimately, by going to the GIC, the key is not only you're spreading your risk among a pool of 500,000 subscribers now,
right.
all state
Not
employees,
just,
100 in some other school and town districts, right? But you're now in a pool of about 500,000 subscribers. So now you're spreading that loss run risk. So Harvard Pilgrim's losing money off us. We went out to do a competitive bid 3 years ago, and not one healthcare provider bid on us. And even Harvard Pilgrim denied us at a 22% increase.
Ouch.
So it tells you how bad the profile was from risk. Well, now that you're in the GIC, there's a key second element to it. There's more plan choice. And why is that important?
Right.
If you're a 27-year-old teacher, librarian, firefighter, or school employee, you now have a lower premium plan that is more applicable to the fact that you're young and invincible, which you and I were one day.
Your own healthcare needs are minor compared to somebody that's older.
Correct. And so, and for those folks that are like me in middle age, right, we can choose a plan that's better for us. And typically you do see people that are older, nearing retirement,
or
get a little
those older passed into retirement,
or have chronic disease, or they have concerns or injuries, or maybe a large family. They go with the Cadillac plan.
Right.
But when you don't give people that customizable choice, they tend to gravitate toward the middle to higher end plans.
Sure.
And so by having more choice, you're able to, as an employee, and because we're becoming a younger organization quickly, you're seeing some of those savings both on the town and school health insurance area. So we saved about $750,000 to $800,000 in active employees by moving to the GIC.
Just in the plan choices.
Just in the plan choices on the designs that were there. And in our budget, we do have, for transitionary purposes, some buffer accounts, because we know that when school starts, somebody talked to their friend and they say it's a great plan in a qualifying event with layoffs in the private sector. So we do have a nice buffer built in this budget. But the good news is that there is strategic savings to the GIC. And the last point with the GIC is it's a state budget item. So now our members are now constituents of Rep Roy and Senator Roush and Senator Spilka and all these other lawmakers, Rep Vaughn and next door. And so wherever you live, you now have a stake in the game of how the state is going to manage their health care, and there's more surety there than if we were on our own.
Correct.
So all of those points are like really great, right? Workers' comp is coming down. Unemployment is coming down because we're not talking about layoffs anymore. Workers' comp profile's gotten better. Our pension assessment with the prepay is coming down. Healthcare to the GC. So, Jamie, why are you not here with champagne bottles and popping corks? Well, the biggest enchilada out of all of this, where we saw the biggest increase, which basically offset the cost decreases, was retiree healthcare. I want to make it very clear. If retirees are listening to this, the town administrator is not, like Steve.
I'm one of those.
Okay, this is actually really helpful. We are not blaming retirees for the problem. And the reason is because there is this big, beautiful bill that was passed by Congress last summer in 2025. After we had already passed our budget for the year. And when a federal law is like that's passed, you don't know the next day what the trends are going to be. But in that big, beautiful bill, which I personally believe is a disaster, one of the biggest series of cuts was to Affordable Care Act subsidies, Medicare and Medicaid.
Sure.
So as a result, this current fiscal year in FY26, premiums for Aetna, which was our retiree plan, went up 60+% mid-year.
Yeah.
Now, every city or town's dealing with this. This is not unique to here.
No.
So while we don't quite know the full impact this fiscal year, it's you can't look at the comparison from year to year on our budget sheets and immediately come up with, well, what's the problem here? Because the problem is our FY26 budget was deficient to pay for the increases that have had the downstream effect. Now, it's taken the healthcare industry, and don't forget, there's been cuts to NIH research grants.
Oh, yeah.
There's been cuts to hospitals. There's been cuts to community centers. That bill is a big, beautiful disaster.
Right.
And that disaster is now having an effect on our operating budget here in Franklin, like every city or town, because retiree healthcare now does not have the subsidies it used to have. Now, I also want to note that if you look at year to year, you see this big spike that goes up. It's because the FY26 budget never really reflected the spike in the Aetna rates.
Right.
So for the retiree rates. So people are going to look at this. The good news is, though, on the flip side of that mountain, is that the retiree rates for the GIC are structurally more affordable by over 10% less than what the current Aetna rate is.
Yeah.
So now that the retirees, apparently like you, Steve,
like me,
are now enrolled in the GIC, in FY28, this all bodes well, for once we're out of this transitionary period, our retirees are now on the GIC, which is a lower rate than what we would have been paying if we had not gone into the GIC this year.
Correct.
And we had stuck with Aetna.
Right.
So it's going to be hard for a lot of people to see this right away. But longer term, which is what I think the school committee and the council are committed to as well, I don't think anybody believed this year was going to be the year we're going to figure this out.
No.
This should be music to their ears as of today, that looking out into the future. There's one other element that I'm going to mention that's positive for the future. Chapter 32B requires that when you see savings, like I illustrated earlier, you have to actually share those savings with the public employees.
Okay.
So the most typical thing most cities and towns do is they give a 1-month premium holiday.
Sure.
So in January of 27, retirees and active employees will not pay their premium because we're required to do that by law under a public employee committee, a PEC agreement. And there's 435,000 that we have to pick up the tab as a town for that 1-month premium holiday.
Okay.
So the initial reaction from people may be, well, that's nuts. Why are we doing that? Well, I can't believe we're doing this, right? But I have to also uphold the law, or else I'm going to be in court and I'm going to get sued and I'm going to have union grievances, as they should. We honor that agreement with that one-time premium holiday, but structurally going into FY28, that $435,000 does not need to be paid year after year. It's a one-time premium holiday.
Right.
So moving into FY28, we're going to shed $435,000 off the budget right away on that. If the audience listening to this is confused, I get it. We're not here to have you do your own math and whatever.
There's no virtual spreadsheet in the air with pluses and minuses now.
But I think from a messaging standpoint and from where we're going now structurally, as we look out into FY28 already, number one, in FY27, the budget deficit is now not $2.1 million. It's now $1.1 million. So we've shed $1 million, in structural budget deficit. When you look at the 435 for the PEC agreement for the premium holiday this year, that deficit's now coming down even more.
Sure.
Right? So I think we're starting to get within a stone's throw of the ocean of achieving what I think a lot of people in the community want to do, and clearly the town council and school committee want to, which is land the plane, balance the budget structurally, and then in the future, once that's done, hopefully in FY28, then you start a conversation in the community about what the future beholds.
Well, and that's where...
And is this facilities? Is this capital projects? The Remington Jefferson remodel? The police station? Are there investments that future parents have spoken loud and clear, in my view, through the citizen survey and qualitatively at the mic and on emails? Younger parents who have moved into the community over the last 3, 4, 5 years, rightfully so, Steve, they're looking for more investments in public education. I think we would all agree with that. So I think we're close.
Right.
And so my hope is that people try not to dive too heavily into the crossfire of these numbers, but try to take away the idea that we have thought outside the box, we are making bold decisions, we are trying to educate the community on the budget process, trying to engage the community more, to not feel bad or depressed that, the numbers are still what they are, but the message is we are narrowing the structural budget deficit. In FY 28-29, we should be able to use fewer free cash dollars towards the budget.
Right.
And if we can just kind of hold the line on spending and on new stuff for a little while, I think maybe we'll be able to get there. And I will even admit, the last comment I'll make, I will even admit, looking at restoring some of these positions, like the 2 school resource officers, the assistant town manager, and the investments in the assessor's office and the finance office, also contribute to this. Mm-hmm. If the council and the community does not want to engage in these investments, they could probably narrow that gap this year more.
Right.
The downside to that strategy is I feel very passionately, based off what I've heard from the community, is they want these back.
Agreed.
One of them they need back,
right,
in my office.
Yeah.
But then the school resource officers have a widespread constituency in the community to get back. And so if you don't do them now, you're just delaying by a whole another year and a half realizing that built capacity, not just in my office, but in the police department. And if they're trying to bring in new growth, and they're trying to bring in new revenues and try to capture revenues that are ours, you need to invest in the inspector with the building commissioner. You need to get into the assessor's office. You need to get into the finance office to free up our department heads. Right. And you need a deputy town administrator. So these aren't, while you may be closer to balancing the budget this year if those weren't in the budget, you're actually now just delaying the strategic investments in that by a whole nother year and a half. So there's a lot of different ways people are going to look at these numbers. Overall, I think we're headed in the right direction. And hopefully over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be able to work through with the elected bodies and really walk them through. While this is a tough transitionary year on healthcare, the decisions that have been made have been good decisions, and they're going to help us get out of our deficit mess.
Yeah, and I think going back to your budget memo, the use of the free cash this year and potentially next year, although potentially at this point still moving numbers somewhat less, next year should be less than this year.
Yep.
The other key piece that it buys us the time for is setting up that strategic plan in terms of how do we fix the structural deficit, which we have not been able to do. And now you've got 16 people who are theoretically focused on doing that. And they've already, at least on the interim, determined that potentially they're not going to use an outside resource to help them figure that out, which is, I've said in other places, I'll continue to say, I applaud you for taking the effort. From my experience, I'm not sure you're going to have the bandwidth to actually pull it off. But to the extent that you try, that's great.
I agree.
Because then the fallback is, okay, then you go back to either new vendors or those 1 or 2 that already stepped up and say, okay, we went this far, now take us to the next step. Because that can't get lost.
Absolutely.
We need that piece. The budget this year simply buys us the time to get to that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, first of all, I've been here 11 years. I think we've had 3 meetings between the council and the school committee in the last year and a half.
Correct.
Jointly.
Yeah.
I expect more.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for the community.
Absolutely.
The community should be applauding these folks for doing this.
Right.
As Mr. Nutting would note, and maybe you, because you know a lot, I mean, this has not always been the case, and there's been a lot of resistance to sitting in the room together and getting there. Relationships are still being built. Relationships are still being formed. And they want to take a shot at self-policing this. That shows strength.
Right.
They resisted spending money and said, why don't we give us a shot first? This is why people elected us. That's a strong statement. When you look at the numbers here structurally, it's going to feel like this year was a little bit of a loss. But actually, if you peel the onion back a little, you're going to see more wins and more structural advantages than you are deficits.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's going to be a massive healthcare deficit that is going to accrue from us leaving the self-insured consortium.
Right.
And I've spoken about this. Right now, that deficit is about a little over $1 million. Now, we still have 2 more months. That deficit could go up a little more. It actually could go down a little more. Our loss runs have actually been very strong in the last several months. So I'm trying to maintain hope. But the key is getting out of this consortium, paying our bills, and leaving that in the background. So as we enter FY28,
Right.
these issues that we've had behind of us are now behind of us, as you eloquently stated earlier. And now we can start looking forward. And I think to your point about the strategic plan, as of today, when we broadcast this, there are no majorly controversial housing developments being proposed in Franklin. I'm narrowing the structural budget deficit by half, and I'm giving hope and optimism that in 28 we may be able to actually not only add the strategic positions to bring in some more revenues,
Right.
but also trying to tell folks if we can kind of have that converge in one place with managing our money well, holding the fort on some of this new spending, embrace the assistant town manager, the admin, and the other new staff that are coming back.
Right.
Give it a year and a half, year or two to gel those systems. In a year or two, maybe less year, you're looking at the possibility of maybe kind of a fresh take on the community, right? Almost
From a budget side.
Well, and I think from a growth side. I think also just both. I think both
from a growth,
saying
from a budget
who
side.
are we?
Right. Yeah.
What is our identity as a community?
Well, and
who
I
do we
think-
want to be? And I think this came out in our hearings. Councilor Callaway Tripp speaks for a lot of people in the community that may have more resources than her too.
Right.
But they're still struggling to get a vacation on the budget because they're dealing with stuff, right?
Agreed.
They may be employed.
Agreed. Yeah.
But also, you have people that are new to the community who want investments in public education, right? So you kind of got to ask yourself, in another 6 months to a year or so, if the relationships can keep forming, if we can manage the budget really well, if we cannot get too opinionated on all of this and try to put the cart before the horse and just let it flow, surrender to the flow a little bit, let's just let it breathe. In 6, 8, 10, 12 months, I think you nailed it. You're looking at a group of people that are diverse in terms of their stakeholder bases and their opinions.
Yeah.
They need to challenge themselves on how is Councilor Callaway Tripp going to recognize that school committee members and other counselors want large investments in public education or infrastructure and buildings, but how do those that want to spend a lot of more money also, how are they going to relate to Councilor Callaway Tripp and other members who are concerned about maybe they've retired and they're selling their homes, maybe that they don't have the resources they once did when they were in the workforce.
Right.
People are now on fixed incomes when they retire, right? They generally kind of scale back saying, I'm not making the money I used to.
Sure.
And I think the question for the 16 elected officials, the Finance Committee, the Council on Aging, the Library Board of Trustees, the Records Advisory Board, the Community Preservation Committee, and the Downtown Partnership, the SAFE Coalition, the food pantry, stakeholder groups in this community, the YMCA. Who are we now? And how do we listen to one another? We have an opportunity to be a community that says the national narrative of division we're going to put aside. Are we going to listen to one another and try to lend an olive branch closer to one another? Or are we just going to stay in our corners and keep shouting the same message, hoping that someone's going to change their opinion? I think there's a real opportunity with all the division in the last couple of years. I think there's a real opportunity in the very near future where our elected officials can try to begin to have those conversations. And I think they have laid the groundwork by resisting the consultant right now, but also doing what FinCom did and digging into the numbers, and many counselors have met with our department heads in their facilities. They've taken tours, they're educating themselves, they're reading the material, they're working hard at this. You really have an opportunity to be a community in a year or so to try to really bring people back together with the hope that we're not going to be talking about overrides, we're not talking about tax increases, we're not talking about development in town. Mm-hmm. This gives them the ability of a window to say, development-wise, what do we want?
Right.
Now we hear messages from many counselors saying we want new growth. Mm-hmm. A year ago, that was not the case.
Right.
So now we're in a position saying, okay, well, everything's been paused. Mm-hmm. I think the election has served its purpose, for sure. Mm-hmm. Now the hard part comes where, okay, now who do we want to be and how are we going to work together?
Yeah.
And I think it's there.
The plus I'll add there is that while the council and the school committee learn what they don't know, mm-hmm. we, the public, are going to also learn
correct
along the way.
That's right.
So in terms of an accessibility, you could tap into any meeting 4 years ago, and you're thrown in, and there's all kinds of acronyms, all kinds of talk, and you had no idea what was going on.
Totally. Yeah.
Any meeting these times, the first time something comes up, whether it's a zoning bylaw or an alcohol thing, you're getting the education in terms of this is the basics, this is what you need to do, this is your role, this is what happens. And oh, by the way, everybody else is learning with you.
Correct.
So now we're taking the people along with us, and heaven forbid, there may still be somebody, I am surprised, where did this come from?
Yep.
Well, clearly they just weren't paying attention. But for the majority who at least were participating, they'll know.
They will.
Because they'll have come along on the ride.
And I think you've got new demographics, too. It may be the older townies, like Council Colorado, who've lived here their whole life, right? Mm-hmm. And several others, Council Dolorco and others, right?
Right.
And folks that are learning along the way. But you also are going to have a lot of new residents, despite not saying they're all parents.
Right.
But you have new residents walk around for this ride, too. And sometimes you have to hit those failed overrides to look around and say, what next? And I think Councilor Cormier-Ledger very eloquently stated this at one of the last meetings, saying, I've been doing this for 4 years now, and we've tried it this way.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
Right.
So his mind is open to trying new ideas and solutions. Sure. And while free cash is maybe not optimum, we've got to give we've got to give a new strategy some life here, and he's going to support that.
Agreed.
So
because he also wants to bring in capital items
correct.
That don't belong in capital, realistic. And in a perfect world, they shouldn't be in capital.
They shouldn't be.
You should have an operating line item called capital budget.
And at one point, they were in the budget, and they were taken out because the town couldn't afford them. So,
right.
And then the last comment, I guess, on free cash, it's been stated that this is, I've heard words like dangerous. I've heard other words. This is not dangerous.
This is a strategic move.
This is not dangerous, okay? I would be willing to bet you almost every single city or town in the Commonwealth, at least over, not the small towns in the Berks, but
mm-hmm.
The majority of communities that are above 10, 15,000
mm-hmm.
population. I'd be willing to bet you that almost every one of them has used free cash in their history to balance their budgets.
Right.
The town of Natick just passed a $7 million override last year. They were habitually using $2 to $4 million in free cash every year for over a decade.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, this is not the first time we've used free cash.
It's not the first time we have.
No.
You try to hold the line and not do it if you can.
Clearly.
But I also think the superintendent and I have been on the same page about this, when I pitched the strategy to him last summer and I said to Lucas, and he agrees, we need to do something new, because I believe what Councilor Cormier-Ledger said was correct. Why are we talking about tax increases? Even if the margin was 1% and they were close, you make the situation worse, like the town of Easton, where you went back again and it lost by more the second time. The town of Millis went back and did it and it lost by way more. So why are we mm-hmm. continually going back in and doing these things? The free cash issue prevents any layoffs. Mm-hmm. It produces no budget cuts to the schools.
Right.
It produces no other budget cuts to the town. It prevents more deep cuts to DPW and facilities, which we all know have taken a huge share of this over the last couple of years. It has not just been the schools who have taken the cuts. I don't like that narrative out there. I know that the schools are always usually one of the first to get cut, and the reason why they do is because they're 71% of the budget. So when you're that share of the budget, you're going to take a hit.
There will be. Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, using free cash is not dangerous. Using free cash is a bridge to, hopefully to your point a moment ago, to getting the 16 elected officials and other stakeholders and boards in the same room to come up with a sustainable, cogent, solvent financial strategy for the future.
Correct.
And if the residents of town have had enough with cost of living increases, Steve, I think I can speak for you on this. So am I as a homeowner. Like, I'm sure you are.
In our lifetime, did we expect to pay more than $4 a gallon of gas?
Not when the previous gallons 2 years ago was lower than what I was paying 15 years ago.
No, right.
Energy costs, healthcare costs.
Sure.
Obviously the federal issue with the big, beautiful disaster. Maybe there are other provisions in there that are popular. I don't know. I don't pretend to know everything about it. So maybe some of it was positive for some people. But I can tell you on healthcare, it's hurt the most vulnerable people.
Sure.
It's hurt people who are poor.
Yep.
The governor is saying, 8% of our population is going to lose health care from this. Well, that now that cost is going to be on the state government,
sure,
which is going to take away other resources for other grants and other things.
Increase pressures on what we want out
and
of
it's
that
just,
as well.
I'm now 51 this year, and I sit here, and you're obviously a little older than me, Steve, but I just can't still seem to get my arms around how our country just cannot figure out healthcare.
Right.
I in my youthful vigor, I was there, by the way, in the third row at Faneuil Hall the day they signed the Blueprint for America, where Romney signed the law that the Democratic legislature put through for healthcare reform in 2004.
Sure.
I was in the room. I worked in the legislature when that was happening. I remember all of it like it was yesterday. And 21 years ago, I thought we would never talk about this issue much again.
Right.
I thought we were leading the nation like we do on this. Ted Kennedy was there. Obamacare was a blueprint off of this.
Sure.
And it's just so sad to see our politics get into this place where we just can't seem to get our bleep together as a country to figure out something that affects every single citizen across the country, every homeowner, every property owner, every family, every child.
Yeah, I think the term you used there goes back to one of the things we said before, where it's a label issue.
Yeah,
because it was healthcare, and yet it became Obamacare.
Correct.
If it stayed healthcare, we would have had a better chance of it maintaining.
And that vote, look, just for people that may not be paying attention, and I've admitted I've been around for a little while here. I mean, the resolution to get the Affordable Care Act through, they had to shove it through a budget reconciliation process, and it passed by one vote. The American public should not be shocked that the big, beautiful bill was passed through a budget reconciliation process and barely passed by a vote or two. We're talking about half the country's trying to decimate the system. Half the country doesn't want it or has opinions on it.
Right.
And by the way, I didn't see my federal income tax go down.
No.
Because of all these cuts they're making.
Yep.
So, it's part of this distrust, I think, in the federal system, which is bleeding to the state and local, which I do understand, where the average person is looking at Luigi Mangione, right, murdering somebody right on camera, clear as day.
Right. And
yet there's a sizable amount of people that are supporting this. You have comedians who are out there articulating a fascinating message saying, if you're going to be a trillionaire, could you at least maybe give your employees like a better healthcare premium so they can get their teeth fixed, they can get dental insurance, and so there is this just very polarized set of dynamics that is just, I think, most people, regardless of party, where you live in America, most people just simply seem very frustrated with both parties, all affiliations, that they somehow can't work with the big stakeholders to just be able to provide a sustainable and predictable, right,
that would help,
set of healthcare standards for
Sure.
their families, so that every 4 years, when someone changes office, we're just trying to out-bludgeon the other team. And it's getting really frustrating. And for people that think I'm going off on a political thing here, I'm not, because I've watched this now my whole career. You know, the Affordable Care Act made improvements and got a lot of people health care in our country. It wasn't perfect. It didn't help everybody. But it did help states. And it did help systems like the Group Insurance Commission and local governments. And now we see it going the other way, and I recognize the politics of it. But now we're looking at a possible opportunity where we could have really made a big dent on our structural budget deficit.
Right.
But right when we were on the line to make an improvement in our budget, you know, the subsidies now are trickling down. And obviously I'm very concerned for FY28 into seeing what else happens. It seems like the tourniquet has happened in D.C. We'll see what the midterms are like. I do think that the public is generally not happy with the retiree Aetna increases, predominantly to retirees and senior citizens across the country.
Sure.
But this healthcare issue, I sincerely hope that if Rep. Roy and Senator Roush and Congressman Auchincloss or other staffers are listening to this, you know, they really got to go back to, you know, almost a new blueprint and just figure out, maybe forget the past. What are we doing for the future? Because, you know, we can't, cities and towns cannot within Prop 2.5 be able to prop this up. And one thing I am nervous about is if we don't manage these healthcare costs, you know, I think at some point, this is why you're seeing the town of Lexington and others laying off 60 teachers. I mean, Lexington mid-year just laid off 64 teachers.
Right.
Lexington.
Right.
One of the wealthiest communities in all of New England.
Correct.
Or fluent, whatever.
Yeah.
So I hope that this has been helpful for people for a little while. You know, we're here for you if you have questions on healthcare or any other areas of the budget. You know, overall, things look like they're trending in the right direction. I give all the elected officials a lot of credit for working together. The school committee has done an excellent job managing their costs, making the tough decisions at collective bargaining. They made the tough decisions with redistricting. They made tough decisions with fees. But those decisions by Chair Griffith and Vice Chair Callahan and others, you know, Ruth Ann O'Sullivan and Dave McNeil and other people that have been privy to it over the last 3 or 4 years, you know, and the superintendent, you know, look, where we were 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot more division. There was a lot more chicanery going on. But we've got a leadership team in place where they're now making those hard decisions, and it's producing the results. And I don't think the educational quality has gone down at Franklin Public Schools at all. Same thing with the town, although I would argue infrastructure's taken a big hit, and we're seeing those impacts. But we're trying to make the decisions possible to try to land the plane here, get rid of this deficit, try to avoid tax increases, and just try to regroup in a year or so and give the elected officials an opportunity to kind of create a fresh vision on development, budgeting, services, and all that stuff. And, you know, I'm hopeful and optimistic. I'm not cautiously optimistic, by the way. I am really, truly hopeful and optimistic that we're going to be able to get there.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you for taking time. The quick reminder certainly is June 3rd, June 10, June 17. Will be the next critical dates. School committee may get involved depending upon what happens to their level of the funding and the budget, but let's be optimistic and that it goes forward, and then they don't need to meet again. But
well, they're going to all meet again, I think, and I think that's the right thing to do. But I think, you know, it would be nice if, as Lucas and I talk about often, it'd be nice to have a summer without talking about redundancies and deficits and you know, and all that stuff. So hopefully we're pushing people into the summer here with a positive message.
Indeed. Good. Well, thank you again for doing this. And to the listeners, thank you for listening. We do this because Franklin Matters. We are now producing this in collaboration with Franklin TV and Franklin Public Radio. This podcast is my public service effort for Franklin, but we can't do it alone. We can always use your help. How can you help? If you can use the information that you find here, please tell your friends and neighbors. If you don't like something here, please let me know. Through this feedback loop, we can continue to make improvements. And I thank you for listening. For additional information, please visit franklinmatters.org. If you have questions or comments, you can reach me directly at suresteve@gmail.com. The music for the intro and exit was provided by Michael Clark and the group East of Shirley. The piece is titled Ernesto Mañana, copyright Michael Clark and Tintype Tunes in 2008, and used with their permission. I hope you enjoy. By the way, you can also subscribe and listen to Franklin Matters Radio on your favorite podcast app. Search in podcasts for Franklin Matters.